Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things Mompreneur Life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Hey friends. So today is a very special day in the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast life. So we are celebrating today 1 year anniversary from when we launched the podcast. And I say we because this was not a single effort. It wasn't just me on the mic. It was you listening to the episodes. It was you sharing the episodes. It was you that were on the launch team and helped the word get out about the show. And it was those behind the scene, my podcast management team, who have been helping me not only just launch the podcast, but help me to continue to put out shows every single week. And so I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support, for how you share the episodes, how you send me messages about, this episode really hit home. This was a group effort, and it will continue to be a group effort. And I'm just so thankful for all the support. And, people ask me all the time, how do you do it all? And I just want to say that I don't. I have become really great at delegating. I've become really great at knowing how to stay in my own lane and outsource the rest. And so I thought, what a fun way to celebrate this 1 year milestone by bringing on my podcast manager, Haili Murch. And she also has a team that helps. Chris is her assistant who helps with graphics and editing of the podcast. And I wouldn't be here a year later, y'all, if it wasn't for them. And so I'm just excited to bring her onto the show. We talk about Mompreneur Life. We talk about podcasting because I know some of you may be listening and maybe you're feeling a tug on your heart, like, I want to have my own podcast. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things podcasting. And of course, we're going to hit on Mompreneur Life because that's what this show is about. So let me tell you a little bit about Haili. Haili is a mom of 2 boys and a podcast connoisseur. She helps women entrepreneurs launch and manage podcasts. She saw that podcasting was growing and not going anywhere, and that entrepreneurs needed her services. Yes, we need her services. She saw that people needed a place to teach, share their knowledge, and have a platform for their voice outside of a static post. So she created the podcast Power Launch and helps people launch their podcasts in 4 weeks. And I will tell you, that was a huge draw to me and her services, is that it wasn't this, long drawn out process. It was 4 weeks dedicated to getting the show together, getting all the things that you're probably rolling around in your head trying to figure out yourself. She can help you with. And we talk about it in this episode. She has been working as a podcast manager for almost 4 years and has worked on over 50 different podcasts now. She offers podcast management services. She helps people start a podcast. And this is something new she's just launched in the last month or so, is she helps people relaunch their podcast. So maybe you created a podcast and it's just been kind of sitting and you haven't done anything with it. Or maybe you're bored with your show and you want to kind of revamp it. She helps with that as well. She is continually amazed with the variety of podcasts and the value they bring to their listeners and their businesses. So I'm really excited for you to hear from Haili. And again, thank you so much for your support and helping me reach not only my goal for downloads by my 1 year anniversary, like 2 months before my 1 year anniversary, but also for your just continued support and sharing and following the show. I always am open to suggestions. If you want to hear more information on a certain topic, send me a DM. I'm going to be, if you're listening to this podcast on, I guess this will drop Thursday, the 7th. I'm going to be on Instagram today doing giveaways. So be sure to go to @Martine 31 Williams. Sorry, I had to think about that for a minute. At Martine 31 Williams to follow me on Instagram. I'll be doing some giveaways and I'll be sharing just some fun facts about the podcast and how things have all gone down in the last year. So if this is your first episode, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. Get your pen and paper ready and be ready to be encouraged by Haili's story. And thank you again for your support. Well, hey, friends, welcome back to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Today's episode is number 46, and we are having a Turquoise talk in honor of my 1-year anniversary. I'm super excited that a year ago this week, I launched this podcast. And without the support of you every day, every week, coming to listen to the episodes and sharing the episodes, I still wouldn't be here a year later. So I'm super excited for the guest today because without her and her team, Chris, I wouldn't have this podcast, y'all. For me, it's the logistics of all the behind the scenes work that goes into launching a podcast. I don't have any problems sharing stories. I have no problem talking on a microphone or any of that stuff, but it's all the behind editing and just knowing you have someone in your corner to support you, to really keep you on track. And so I'm so excited to have Haili Murch here on the podcast today. So thank you so much, Haili, for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to celebrate with you 1 year. Congrats. That's so exciting. That's awesome.
It is so exciting because it was kind of one of the things, that's been on my dream board for a while. And as I just shared, it was just kind of I want to do this, but we were just talking, Hannah and I were just talking about, I just spent way too much time trying to figure out my computer with an external hard drive. So those are the kind of things, the behind the scenes or the technology part that a lot of times stops people from taking that next step. So I'm so thankful. I believe we got connected because of a mutual friend that was in another mastermind or coaching group. And I don't know if you posted or she posted about your services and how an amazing job you did for her. So that shows how important it is to also be in these networking groups, right? And to not just be in the group, because there's a lot of free Facebook groups out there where you can network, but actually engage and pay attention to what's going on. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the top reasons for podcasting. It's a great way to connect with people and to network. And so if you're in those groups, you have opportunities to do this,
right?
Whether that's for yourself or to be guests on other people's shows. It's a really great opportunity for a lot of people.
Right. Well, I also wanted to have you on the show because you're a mompreneur. And that's my audience. And that's who I like to help and to serve each week here on the podcast. So tell us a little bit about you, your family. I really don't know much about your personal background. You have your own podcast, and you're also a podcast manager. So tell us a little bit about you, your family, and kind of your story on how you became a mompreneur.
Yeah, happy to. So I am hitting almost 4 years of what I would call the mompreneur journey. That'll be in August, so next month. I have 2 boys, so that puts me, I guess I should explain what I am a mom and where my kids are at. I have an 8 and a 5-year-old. And so I guess they were little. It makes me sad. They were 4 and 1 when I started. And honestly, the reason I started the whole thing was kind of the stage of life we were in at the time. I mean, that's a very young stage of family. My husband and I had been together at that point for 6 or 7 years. And it was just that early family married life where you're just kind of getting by and it's really hard and you're paycheck to paycheck. And we had a lot of debt left from school and we lived in California for a time for a job, which really put us behind just because of the cost of living there. I currently live in St. Louis, if that helps explain that a little bit. And so big lifestyle differences, basically. And so anyways, we were just in a stage where I just felt like it was time for me to do something. I always pictured going back to work when kids were in school. And so I still felt like, they're 4 and 1. I have a while, but it got to a point where I was like, what can I do now to start helping this? So we're not waiting to live our life. It started to feel really stressful and depressing sometimes, to be honest. So I found a program called the Free Mama Movement. I don't know if anyone out there is familiar with Lauren Golden. If not, go check her out if you've ever considered starting a freelance business. She helps moms learn how to freelance. And so that's what I initially did. And then from there, about a year into just taking random jobs, I did some podcasting, YouTube, Pinterest. I was doing a lot of jobs to figure out what I really wanted to do. And then I niched into podcasting because I have a background in songwriting and producing. And so like it was very natural for me to be editing vocal and stuff like that. And so I just found that podcasting was something I was good at. I learned more about it. And then I niched down. And in 2020, my business just doubled like crazy. Everybody was at home. People were starting podcasts with their business. And then Martine mentioned Chris, who's been working for me, now for over a year and a half. And since Chris has come on, we've been able to take on more people because I just have the extra help. And so we've been able to help launch more podcasts. I guess the last thing I would add is Martine mentioned that I have a podcast. I would say I had a podcast. I had my podcast, Legit Motherhood, for about a year and a few months. But I stopped it. It's been over a year now. I stopped it in 2021 because my podcast business was growing so quickly. Mm-hmm. And it's ironic that as someone who helps people with podcasts, I barely had time to do my own. And maybe that was my stubborn side of not wanting to hire it out because I was like, I can do this. This is what I do. So it was just kind of an ironic thing. But honestly, if I'm just going to make a small plug for pivoting in your business, it was just a time of my business where, although I loved talking about motherhood, my podcast was more in the broader spectrum of like, we talked about postpartum things. We talked about women body things. We talked about women's stories. It was really inspiring and awesome. It wasn't really aligned with my business, which I'll probably mention again, but like having a podcast really helps with your business growth. And I was just in two different places. And so I just felt like something had to go. And at the time it was the podcast. Will I start a podcast again one day? Definitely, yes. I love doing it. I think it's really fun and valuable. I just haven't had the idea and the alignment feel right yet to start again. So right now I just focus on managing podcasts, which is what we do for Martine, and we launch and relaunch podcasts right now. So that's kind of our expertise.
I love that. I don't think I knew your show was on hold, but I love that you recognized first. I love what you said that you, in the beginning, you just were trying different things to really figure out what you wanted to do. I think sometimes we don't try anything, right? We just like, well, I'm going to sit back and wait for that, golden opportunity to show up, or for me to know for sure, this is what I'm going to do. And we know that's not how God works. We have to take that next step, and then he illuminates the next and the next. So kudos to you for being willing to try other things, before you landed on niching down to podcasting. But I do think there's a mess before the success in any entrepreneur, mompreneur's life. So describe or kind of share with us the mess before the success with, I would say, not just launching your own podcast, but building your business to where it is today. Like, what were some of the messes that you experienced? Because there's someone who's listening, who's thinking, I might want to freelance. I might want to start my own business, but they're worried about the messes, and we all have them. So I think that's what makes the stories relatable to people, is to kind of hear, okay, this is what was messy for me.
The real. Well, I can go back to my
legit motherhood. How about the legit mom?
That's what I was going to say. I was like, I was all about the legit motherhood and being raw about it. Yeah, no, I don't say any of that to make it sound like 4 years of this has been easy at all. Mm-hmm. In fact, that first year was probably the hardest because I was trying to navigate what the heck I was doing. And I think, gosh, you bring up such a good point, like trusting in kind of what God has in place for you. Like looking back, it's really humbling in a way to go, wow, like there were sometimes I was done. There were some times that it was really painful, whether that meant I lost a good client, whether that meant I didn't get the client I wanted. I mean, that first year was a lot about making connections and networking and like really figuring out my place. And that was a really hard place to be in, just because I wanted to just know, I wanted the answer. But I had to go through that process of basically putting myself out there. I still struggle with my relationship with social media, but one thing that was really hard for me was like posting more about myself and like being open online, because I thought that was dumb. And I was like, I don't want to tell everybody my life online.
Right.
Nobody needs to hear this. Nobody cares. And once I got past some of that and just started sharing, like, it was really, really cool. Just the kind of connections I would make. And then that in turn turned into a lot of clients eventually. I would also say that there's been times and seasons that have been messy. So like I said, I was really busy in 2020, and that was beautiful in a financial standpoint. It was really hard on me mentally. I was just in COVID. I have a timesheet software that I use. So I actually clock my time because I'm just curious on how I spend my time, where it's going, how long does it take me to do certain projects, which helps me approach clients very authentically to be like, it takes me this much time to do this. And I was working like, I try to average under 20 hours because I would like to stay in a part-time bubble. I was hitting closer to 30. And I look back and I go, what were you doing? Like doing 30 hours during COVID? You were crazy. So I think that, and that's when I hired out. That was a big step too, to be like, this is too much. For it to grow, I need to hire out help. And I did that. And so I would just say that, like, you know, I always was told this at the beginning too, like, don't compare to someone else's beginning or middle or end, because like someone else might look so successful and far ahead, but you don't maybe see all that it took behind that to get there. And there's no such thing as an overnight success.
Right.
Like I used to work with a client who said that all the time on her podcast. And it's true, because unless some magic wand was blown over your amazing idea or your offer, it's very, very rare. And so everything takes a lot of work. So I would say that it took a lot of work to get to where I am. And I'm still in a middle that I would say that I look up to people still and say, I want to get there. Right. And I'm still trying to get there. So,
right. Well, we're always growing, and until the end. And so I think there's always an opportunity to grow personally and professionally. And I like to say there is no really finish line. There's just a new starting line, So if you're looking for the finish line, like, okay, when I finally get there, and this is what leads to burnout. When I finally get there, then I can get back to working out, or I can get back to date nights with my spouse, or I can get back to fill in the blank there. But to know that you're really ever going to grasp that, to me, is why people run themselves, ragged and run themselves into the ground, because they're trying to reach the finish line instead of understanding there's just a new starting line. Like, your kids are young right now, and you're in a different season where, my kids are teenagers now. And so I'm in a different season. I have a little bit more free time. They don't want to spend as much time with me as I would like them to. So I have more free time, to put into that. So you mentioned, is it an app you use that tracks your time? I'm sure there's someone's listening that's like, what did she just say? How is she doing that? I need to do that.
Yeah. So I use this thing called, it's just toggle.com. I think TOGGL. I don't think it has an E. I'd have to look. But it basically, I just put in what I'm doing. So like right now I'm clocking that I'm in an interview with Martine. And then you can categorize that. So like, I categorize this as networking collaboration time. And so what it does is really cool. At the end of the week, it basically makes graphs for, if you're really into like the visuals, which I love, like it makes a graph of like, you spent this much time doing your launches this week, this much time doing your back end management. So like, it really helps me see like, this took a lot of time last week, or it really helps me stay on track with evaluating my time. And it helps me stay, like I said, to be authentic with my clients of, this is how much time this takes to do this.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes so people
I can definitely do that.
Can look at that. Because I was going to ask you, what routines do you have to set you up for success? So that sounds like a really amazing one. If you struggle with time management, or like you said, you just want to have a picture of how you're spending your time, which is something I have my coaching clients do when we first meet, is, I want you to do like a 3-day log, like how you're spending your time. Because we don't, find time for what matters most. We make time. And the only way to do that is to know how you're spending your time in the first place. So I like to talk about burnout, because I do see it a lot, specifically with mompreneurs. And that's really who I'm passionate about, talking and helping and supporting. So, and I know for some people it shows up differently. And so I'd love to know, just for you, from your perspective, have you ever experienced burnout as a mompreneur? Which I don't really know very many who haven't had some level of it, but how did it show up in your life? Was it anxiety? Was it depression? Was it just the overwhelming feeling, of overwhelm? And then how did you kind of work your way out of it?
Yeah. I would say that I've probably experienced it more than once. I don't know that it's a a one-time thing. But I already come with depression and anxiety. And so I would say that there are points where that has been definitely harder. I would say it's hard to say. It just depends on the nature of the combination. So I would say that it usually would just be that overwhelming feeling, which then either led to a depressed funk or a super anxious funk, because I would just feel like I have too much to do. I definitely would say I felt probably the anxiety the most during 2020, when everybody is figuring it out and you're still trying to live your life, but then you were trying to figure out what's going on in the world. It was just very messy, I'm sure, for everybody. I think last year coming out of that, it was more of like, what's next? And then adding more to my plate in different ways. And so I think when I have been in those burnout times, the biggest thing is just to ask for help. And I think that that's really hard as women, as moms. Sometimes I've had to go through phases where I realized that it's okay to ask for help. So I feel like I'm in a better place now than I used to be, where I was like, no, I can handle all this. But, like for my mental health, I'm still in therapy. I take medication, so that definitely helps. But on the other end, like right now, in the summer, we decided to hire a sitter in the afternoon, a couple days a week. So that has really helped, because I already felt my anxiety kicking in with having littles at home all summer. My husband works at home right now too, so it makes it even harder. And so I just felt like it was worth the extra money to hire someone out, which I know that money, if I'm going to throw that in there for a minute, comes down to a lot of what gets people there, in the sense of like, oh, I need space for this or that. And people are afraid to outsource it, or they're afraid can they afford doing that, or whatever it is. And so although I will be honest, like it probably wasn't like the prime time financially to hire a babysitter. I knew mentally that's what we needed, and that's what I needed for business growth. And that's what my husband needed for space to work as well. And so I think sometimes just being honest with ourselves, of what space you really need for yourself, for your business, for your family, and just letting it be what it needs to be. And what I mean by that is just like whatever next step you need to take, was the hiring out or going to therapy or whatever. It's hard to make those jumps when we're scared or we are feeling a certain way, but I think it's necessary.
Yeah. Well, you've mentioned twice getting help, so like getting help, hiring Chris in your business, and then, getting the sitter for you for personal and professional reasons. And I can remember my coach telling me early on when I was building my business with 31, she was like, you need to get an assistant. And I thought, I can't afford an assistant, number one. And number two, what would I even have her do? Like, it just seems so foreign, because I was like you, like I'm so used to just doing everything myself. And so I think it's a really great point to share that you need help probably before you think you need help. And you need help probably before you think you can afford it. Also, because at that time I didn't see, where the income was going to come from, but, it allows you to spend the time on the things that only you can do and delegate it out so that you can grow your business. That same coach said to me, if more money doesn't give you more time, you don't need more money. Mm-hmm. And that has always stuck with me, because it's not more time to work. It's, if more money doesn't give you more time to be able to spend with your kids or to focus on those revenue generating activities in your business, putting your marketing materials in packets is not something that you need to be doing, because someone else can do that while you are out front talking to your customers and building those relationships. Only you can do those things. So that's just really always stuck with me. Like, I don't need more money if it's not giving me more time to do what I want to do, or what I need to do in my business. So hopefully that'll speak to someone on the podcast as well. So let's talk about podcasting just for a little bit, since that is what you do. And I know there's someone listening who might want to start a podcast this year. So you help launch and you help manage as well. What are you seeing right now as far as what's going on with podcasting? Like, how is it supporting people in their businesses right now?
Yeah. So I would say that podcasts are still not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. I think that they're still they're growing a lot still. People are still starting them basically because they support businesses. And how that they do that is, you'll probably listen. There's some bigger ones out there, you can go find the ones that iHeartRadio does or these bigger companies. That is all sponsorship. That is what is making money, is all those ads. It's kind of like TV. It's just purely ads. I would say for like small business entrepreneurs, online businesses, even other businesses, I feel like what it's doing is you're creating a free resource, which people love free, right? You're creating a free resource, but it's something that is so, like we're doing here, we're talking, we're being authentic, we're opening up, and it's something that's a little more personal than just scrolling through a post or like a 15-second reel, like those are all great things, but I think a podcast brings something a little different. It also is different because people can listen to it anywhere. I mean, I know that there's a lot of push for video right now, which is true. Video is also very popular, but it comes down to time. People don't have time to probably watch us talking as much as they will to listen when they're, especially for your audience of moms, like they're going to listen while they're doing their dishes or while they're on a run or while they're driving the kids in between places. Like there's just so many opportunities to listen to a podcast. And then it just helps with your growth because you're bringing in, you could say, hey, I had this episode come out about this, why don't you check it out? And that's a great way to introduce yourself. And then they might go, wow, I really love that. Maybe you should coach me, so there's just all of these really cool opportunities. You can also use your podcast to sponsor yourself. I had a client who she would constantly make these like mini ads for herself about her newest offer or her latest workshop. And I mean, her podcast was one of her biggest generating of like leads and new people, just because like that was a big hub for sharing her knowledge, which she had a lot to offer and she was doing it for free. And then if you liked that, then you could get all her resources in her program. So there's a lot of really cool things a podcast can do to lead people in. And that's not to say, like when I was mentioning my podcast earlier, yes, I got to a point where I realized it wasn't doing that for me, for my business, because it was kind of two separate worlds. But I could also say that people do it a lot for hobbies and stuff. And had I had the time and energy, I mean, legit motherhood could have turned into very much like I would have had probably more sponsors and more affiliates because there's such a variety of like, I could have partnered with, small Etsy shops, and I could have partnered with people that do coaching for moms, like there's so many things I could have done with that, but because that's not what I felt called to do at the time. And a lot of things changed at that pivot of my business at that time. So I think that, if somebody's on the fence, the other thing that I always say really authentically is feel ready, but you're never ready. So like, some people come to me and they're like, I want to start a podcast, but I can tell by their attitude and the way that they're approaching me that they're just doing it to do it. There's a difference with doing it like that because you're probably not going to be successful versus somebody that's like, I've had this on my vision board. I've had this on my list to do. And I just keep holding back, like help me push the trigger and go. And we talk through that. And then I help, I try to help people realize like, it's time to do it then. I think that I've gotten really good at reading people as far as like when they're ready and when they're not. And so if you've been on the fence, but in a good way, then we should probably talk. But if you're just like, if you're in a burnout stage or an overwhelm, or you have other offers or big pivots in your business, I never, suggest that's a good time just because you're going to add something else that might add to that mess. And you want to be in a space where you feel a little bit more stable with your business. So,
Right. Well, I just appreciate the flexibility too that you've given, in supporting me and my podcast. I mean, I got COVID right like the month after I launched the podcast, and I was really sick. Those of you who've listened probably know that, but I was really sick, and just having someone there to talk through, okay, now what should we do? Should we pause it? I definitely can't show up on, I'm just not feeling well. And so just from a business standpoint, you supporting that and also giving grace, to clients who have life happen. I mean, it just does. And so I thank you for being flexible and supporting. And you brought up a good point in a good idea and something that you want to do, but also knowing your motive and your why. Because when you do there's been times throughout this year of putting out this podcast where I just wasn't feeling it, or I was feeling not creative with my content or what I wanted to bring to the table. And in those moments, you have to go back and kind of revisit, like, okay, why am I doing this? And if you don't have that, right, if it's just, and that's what you're saying, you're able to kind of tell when you're talking with someone, do they have a real reason? Reasons equals results. So if they have a real reason on why they want to start the podcast, that helps them to kind of stay in the game when you get bored with yourself, you kind of get bored with coming to the microphone and talking, when you can remember your mission. And that was kind of what you were saying, like having a real mission and why behind your podcast.
Yeah.
Is there a specific genre of podcasts that you see on the rise or you see a need for as you're kind of supporting other podcasters? Is there one that you're like, yeah, you should definitely try to be in that category, or no, don't go in that category? Or is it all just kind of open?
It's all open. I wouldn't say there's any category here or there, because I think that it's just like watching a TV show right now. There's so many choices and you're going to find what you want. So if somebody loves the true crime stuff, which is really popular, if I'm going to throw a popular out there, but I also think that every genre is going to have their top podcasts. Here's your top 50, 100 podcasts in this category, because people are going to listen to what they want to listen to. So if people are looking for support as a mom, as an entrepreneur, they're going to go find your podcast, or, some of my other clients that I've had in the past. I had 2 restaurant owners that talked about recipes and the restaurant business, and people that were in that in that field and that niche, they would probably want to go find that. So I think that the thing that people hesitate the most on is feeling like the market is saturated. And my argument is that it's never saturated, because you are your own person. So You might have the same idea as Martine and want to start a mompreneur podcast, but because you have different resources and knowledge and experiences and a different personality and voice, it's going to be different. I was terrified to start a motherhood podcast when there's a million of those. And I just got to a point where I had to go, I'm bringing something different. My format of my show is different. My guests are different. So, when you put all that into play, really anyone wanting to start a podcast can do it. That's my plug for it.
And you don't have to have a lot of fancy equipment. You really don't. No. I've seen people record podcasts just from their AirPods on their phone, and that's it. I think I even did an intro one time in Washington, D.C. on a field trip with my iPhone and my AirPods. So you don't have to have all this fancy, expensive equipment. And, Haili definitely will help you and kind of give you a checklist if that's something that you want to do. Is there, I had a question and then my brain just kind of went blank. So I'll move on to a different question about podcasting. Who are your favorite podcasts that you listen to?
My favorite podcasts. So I actually have a couple religious ones, because that's my way of getting scripture in of the stage of life I'm in. It's hard for me to sit down and really read. So there's a podcast called Come Follow Me Real Talk. They're focused on the Bible right now. And so, or the Old Testament rather. And so that's what I've been listening to. It's about 20 minutes once a week. And I'm like, this is great for me. So, that's how I kind of get that in. Another podcast I love, speaking of celebrities, I have 1 or 2 that are kind of the goofy, I like to listen to the Bachelor, Bachelorette ones, or I love the show New Girl. They have a podcast about their show. I love hearing the background of how things are made. And then I have, any of my clients I get to work with, Martine, my team member, Chris, predominantly listens to Martine's all the time. Martine has this show's great. But I have a section of ones that I listen to. So I think what happens to me as a podcast manager is I listen to those 2-3 podcasts a week that I do. And then Chris listens to hers. And then if I have time, I get a couple more in. So it's hard for me to plug in much more on podcasts because, it's kind of my job. So I listen to podcasts a lot, but all of our clients have great shows. That's why we feel that they're a good fit for us. Because we know that you guys are creating great content and material. So, Martine's is great.
Shameless plug. Just kidding. It's great because you helped me make it great. So again, I can't say thanks enough for that. So I remembered my question. There's probably somebody listening who is thinking about starting a podcast, but they think it has to be a certain link a certain type of show, a certain, like cookie cutter they see someone else doing. But there's so many different ways for people to produce their own podcast show, the cadence, the amount of time. And I have someone who the other day I listened to, I don't know if you listen to Your Next Step. That's what it's called. Your next thing. I'm totally butchering her podcast. But anyway, like Sundays, hers is just a reading of scripture. That's it. It's like a 2-minute episode, or a 3-minute episode outside of the thing. And then she has interviews. And so for someone who's listening, and that might be their holdup for even starting the podcast, is like, oh my gosh, I have to record an hour's worth of content. Give them some ideas of, there's just a lot of different ways they can do it. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, totally. So I love that you bring that up. One thing that we actually do when we sign someone on to start a podcast with us, part of what they pay for with our program is we do like this 1 hour, like hash out essentially of how you want to format your show, get everybody on the same page of like the branding and the message of the show. But, about half the time I have people come on with ideas, and we've launched a lady. She actually launched today. Shout out to Rachel King. She had no idea what she wanted to do when we started. And so we started from ground zero with her and walked her through all the steps. So I can confidently say, no matter what stage someone is at, we will help. I will say that, like Martine mentioned, there are so many varieties of formats of show. Don't feel like you have to be on here for 45 minutes talking or even 20 minutes talking if you don't want to. There's a guy, and see, I'm going to butcher someone else's podcast too. I can't remember his name, but there's a guy who's been doing a podcast for like 4 or 5 years, and he does it every day. But it's like 3 minutes or less. And it's like little like motivation plugins every day. And that's his thing. And so but then there's other people who have guests. There's other people who don't have guests at all. And there's people who have a mix of guests. There's people that co-host. There's people that kind of do it different. They'll do like 3 shows a month. I'm going to do 15 minutes, but then once a month, I'm going to have a 30-minute interview, so some people just if the biggest thing is picking your format and sticking to it and being consistent with it. That's what happens. People show up. If you're consistent, like Martine, I don't know if you mentioned this at the beginning. I guess I'll plug it in for you. Martine's about to take a break, which is totally fine. People do that all the time. And actually, we have a client, she's very seasonal. She goes January to June. She doesn't do June to December because that's a very busy time for her family. There's a lot of flexibility with it, but because if the audience is prepared, it's like, hey, I'm going to be on this month break and we're returning here. And hey, this is our season ending now and we'll be back here. Like, as long as you are open with your audience and you're not sporadic in your shows and they know what's coming, people really appreciate that because it makes them feel like they're a part of your community. And you're like, oh, she's letting us know what's going on. So there's so many ways to do it. Don't feel like just because Martine does it this way, even though you love what she's doing, you might have a different idea of how you want to do it. And that's totally fine. So, and then, it goes into details of, we can create your artwork different. We can do your intro and outro format and your music and all these things you can do so different to make it yours.
Yeah. You just have to take those messy first steps. It's one thing I've tried to continue to tell myself when I'm trying new things and, kind of coming out of a season of rest professionally and trying to figure out, okay, God, where do you want me to go next? And he just keeps saying, just take the next step and, take it fearlessly, just take it. And I'm going to eliminate the next one. But I do think Ready is a Lie. Angie, I don't know if you follow Angie Lee. She has a podcast too. I think it's just called the Angie Lee Show, but she's in the middle of kind of writing a book that Ready is a Lie. You're never, like you said earlier, we're never truly ready. You just have to kind of take that first step. And for me, it is knowing I have a support system. So whether it's, like the launch team that helped me launch this podcast, which shout out to all of you on the launch team that continue to listen to the podcast and share it. But then having also you, and Chris beside, and they really did, y'all, that first meeting I came in and I had the idea for sure. I didn't know the name. I think we were still working through the name and the audience kind of helped vote on the artwork and the name and everything, but just really kind of walking me through and being like, okay, we can do this and we can change course. Depending on what season I go into next, who knows? I've seen people change the name of their podcast. I've seen people change the cadence. So I just think you just have to get started and figure it out instead of just waiting to get it perfect, because take imperfect action before you have the perfect plan. Yeah. Take imperfect action before you have the perfect plan, because perfect is not, it's not coming for you. So All right. Anything else about podcasting that you think would be helpful to a listener that we haven't covered?
Um, just that don't be afraid to take that first step. I think a lot of people also maybe who might feel like they don't know much or want to be cost efficient with it might not realize the amount of resources there are for outsourcing podcasts. You can outsource the launch, you can outsource management, you can actually, we don't offer this right now, but there are services that do like guest management. There's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of great courses too, but how much money and, value your money and your time, like that's going to take you time. Actually, you were just mentioning it, just opened up a new thing for relaunching because I saw people that had started podcasts and didn't start it off great, or they want to start their podcast again, which actually Martine just referred me a really awesome client who he's been on a break for a while and he wants to start back up. And so helping people even in the middle of it or the beginning of it when it didn't quite go the way they planned, there's a way to still fix that. So I don't want anyone to feel like no matter what stage you're in with it, that there's not an option to like get help, but you're like not alone in that moment of like, what is next for me? Like there's somebody out there that can help you. So
yeah. Well, fun fact. So I did buy a podcast course because I was at a lab event. I want to say it was 2018 when I bought it. It was like it was Pat Flynn's course, and it was like his beta launch of this course. And I'm like, I'm going to buy it because it's the right price point. And I don't know when I'm going to launch my podcast. And so I never even opened it until, last year when I was like, all right, I'm finally serious. Like I have time now to devote to it. And I have a more clear message that I want to bring to the table. So just want to share that I have made those purchases too, where I, didn't act upon them right away. So it's okay if you've done that. But having someone to physically walk me through the process for me, I have learned is better than just trying to DIY it myself with a course and all of that. So it was a combination of the two that really helped me. But thank you again for all the support that you've given me and the show and the listeners. I'm telling y'all, I would not be producing a show every week if it wasn't for you and Chris. So if you are on the fence or if you're any interest at all, just want to know more information about podcasting, I think you and your team would be an excellent resource for people to be able to just have that conversation. So we're going to put all of her information in the show notes for you. Anything we mentioned today that has a link attached to it, we'll include that in the show notes for people. So I guess I want to ask kind of in closing, if you had a chance to talk to all the mompreneurs of the world, like what would you really want them to know? What kind of encouragement could you leave them with?
So I really loved this question, but it is a big question. But something that has been on my mind a lot is grace versus excuses, because I feel like in talking to my mom friends and then also catching myself, I go, am I having a day where I'm making up excuses for not getting things done, or am I giving myself grace? So an example would be my 5-year-old broke his leg right before summer, and that was nothing anybody expected. And there was a couple of days there, that first couple of weeks, where I really need to do some pushes for exactly what we're talking about today, to get some more clients and to be doing some marketing and to also be doing all my normal weekly stuff. And I just had to pull back because poor kid was in almost a full leg cast. It was really hard to get him around. And so I caught myself in moments going, am I making an excuse not to get this done? My exercise was not great for those couple of weeks either. Like just things like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know what? This is a period where it's okay to give yourself grace. Now we're coming out of, he's finally walking. We're doing, it's all coming slowly together, but we're getting a little bit more back to normal. And so I'm finding myself still on some days waking up and going, oh, I'm so tired. I'm exhausted. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do this or that. And then I go, is this a moment of grace? Do you need this today to have a breather, or are you doing excuses? And I think the difference is like grace to me is like, and I'm not talking about like grace from God, although that is a great thing too. I'm talking about grace with ourselves. Right. Is that the grace of like, I'm doing this once, twice a week. It's not like something I do every day. I think when it becomes an excuse is when we're letting the fears build up and we're just well, I don't have time to, start this podcast or do this part of my business because I don't have time. I don't have money. If those excuses keep playing in your head over and over and it keeps coming up, also, if it keeps coming up, it might mean something, but I just think that I've just realized, what things in my life am I allowing myself to have a break for, so I don't have that burnout. But then on the other end, what am I holding back on? And so no matter what those, thoughts are around those things, you might think of a couple of things while I'm saying that right now, like, yeah, I'm really bad at this. And I keep making an excuse, just take those steps, like trust in yourself in those next steps. Mm-hmm. And then it's okay to have the days where you need to breathe a little bit. But I just think that when we get stuck in this rut of always having excuses or complaining, and I love my mom friends, but sometimes I'm like, all I'm hearing is excuses. Like, right. Yeah. I understand Grace, but like all I'm hearing is like, you're not getting things done because you have fears and you're letting things get in the way. So, and I think that applies personally and in your business. So that's why I was thinking of that and why I wanted to share that.
I think it's awesome because it's about being self-aware. You don't know how you respond to those two things is completely different. So to know, okay, yes, I need to extend grace, or no, these are excuses. How you respond throughout that day, depending on what you're aware of, is a great question to ask yourself when you're, again, finding yourself kind of in that cycle of not doing the thing that needs to get done. Being realistically aligned with the thought process that you're having in that moment helps you move forward one way or the other. You can accept an excuse too. And you're like, yeah, I'm just making an excuse. I mean, there's some days I'm like, I just don't want to do it. And you just don't want to do it. If you don't want to do it, it's probably not going to happen. But I love that. So that's a great send off for sure, to check your thoughts, and are they excuses or is it a moment of grace? And sometimes a little bit of both. So tell me what you're most excited about right now in this season in your business or your life. What you got going on?
Yeah, another big question. Well, right now with podcast world and with that, we are doing a big push right now for launches and relaunches. And we actually just had a couple of management positions come up, mostly because of other people's business pivots. And like I said, we have like a seasonal gal. So we have a lot of opportunity for other people to come in right now. We're having a really big transitional time. And so if anybody's, has questions, like she said, I'm happy to just talk to somebody about where they're at and figure out where your place might be or if it's the right time or not. And so between now and the end of the year, we've got room and we want to help people. I'm really excited about this relaunch opportunity. We've done, I've done one, and now I'm about to do another one with your referral. And then we have someone who's a current client who wants to do it. So like we're trying to, it's kind of a new thing. So be patient with me. I'm being really authentic with you because it's basically a condensed version of what we do a launch with people. We're basically redoing everything we already did, but with a relaunch, you've already established your basics. So like it goes a little bit faster and there's not as much work as the first time, but I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to help people get excited about their shows again. Because I feel like you're saying, sometimes people get a year or so in and they start to get bored or lose their excitement for it. And in my life, well, I don't know. I'm in a very where does God want me stage right now? I think we all go through that, but with my business, and I'm a musician at heart. I've been feeling a lot of call to my music lately. So I don't know what all that means right now. So I'm just being open to it. I'm about to have both my kids in school in the fall, which is like a whole nother motherhood stage. I don't know if I have time. So speaking of time, I'm about to have a lot of time I never have had in a long time. So I'm really excited for that and to see what is next, really. So
that's awesome. Yeah, you're getting ready to have a huge shift in time. And it's funny because I'm talking to some of my coaching clients and they kind of had that shift. And I say, just because you have more time doesn't mean you're going to be more productive. So just keep using,
I have to be careful.
Your tracker. Keep using your tracker because it will keep you honest, with how you're spending your time. But I hope you'll be.
Tell my husband the first couple of days they're gone though, I give myself grace to have a couple lazy days. I was absolutely. I'm gonna have my celebration of my favorite snack in my jammies. I'm gonna watch some shows or movies. Like that's what I get to do. And then Haili puts the work hat on, like I'll be very productive, but I got to give myself those couple days because when have I ever done that? Like, really?
Well, and that's what I was going to say. Like, I hope that you'll schedule in time just for you too. It's not, you have all this free time to just add more work, into your schedule. So
yeah, totally.
Here's your permission slip. If you feel like you ever need it, I'll always give you out the permission slip to get in your jammies, have your favorite snack, and binge watch your favorite Netflix show. So just a few favorites. I like to kind of end the podcast with like some of what your favorites are. So are you a reader? Do you have a favorite book?
I am not a reader.
Okay. That's all right.
Speaking of shows and movies, I'm a big TV shows and movies.
So what's your favorite show that you're watching right now?
Well, we just finished Stranger Things.
So my son's all about the Stranger Things. I can't get into it. We were actually watching it last night with my dad. And he was like, why are we watching that? This is weird. I'm like, it's called Stranger Things.
Yeah. What's so funny is I am not a scary person. I don't like stuff, but for some reason, the story and the characters are so like, just pulled me in. I can't stop. I have to know what happens. So, that one. And then my favorite, Bachelorette, starts next week. So
okay. All right.
I love that stuff.
I like it. So what is your favorite resource or app that you use for your business? Like, do you out?
Well, we mentioned the timing app. I will definitely put that with my links for show notes. I also use Asana. We use that for all of our projects. Love Asana. I'm trying to think what else I use. For my podcasting, like we use what's called Libsyn, which is a hosting website. So if that doesn't sound familiar to people, that hosts when we do Martine's episode, that's what distributes it to like Apple and Spotify and all the different places. And then I use an app called Headliner app, which a lot of people could benefit from. It's just the app that you can put a picture in and then you put your audio clip in, which is really popular right now. Okay. And then you can add like the captions. Fun plug, only 90% of the time do people actually listen to your stuff. I know,
that's so
people
crazy.
Are reading it.
I know, it's so crazy.
So make sure you put captions on stuff right now. That's what I would say. But yeah, those are the few that I use all the time.
All right, we'll put those in the show notes for sure. And do you have a favorite scripture or a favorite quote that's like your mantra or something that really just encourages you when you're in that spot of burnout or overwhelm, or just something you like I've got this thing I bought at Home Goods that says she designed a life she loved. And just as a reminder, that's what I'm trying to do. I'll always want to be in a place of my profession where it's something that I love and not just feel like I have to do it. So anyway, I have so many quotes in my head at all times and lyrics, that. So is there one that you're like, yeah, this one always encourages me, or one is my favorite?
Oh man. Well, when you throw lyrics in there, that just makes it easier. I don't know. I think I go through times and seasons with like the thing that sticks with me. And I guess the thing that's just been with me this year is just going all in. Mm-hmm. So like just putting, and I know that someone might hear that and say, well, that just leads to like burnout, but like, I don't look at it like burnout or hustle mentality. I just look at it of going like, I am on this path to do this with my business, this with my life, and I need to do the steps, stop those excuses, and like do the things I need to do. So just think going all in.
Yeah. It's like being present. That's kind of how I see that too. When your kids, go all in, be there, all in, all there, and present with them. So that's cool. All right. Well, this was fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show and celebrating my 1-year anniversary. I know I've said it, I think at least 10 times in this episode, but I really do appreciate everything that you do to support me and to support the show. And can't wait to see where this second year goes and where we go with the show. And just appreciate all that you and Chris do. Chris was going to come on the show, but she was not feeling well. And so maybe I'll bring her on for another episode, but this was a really fun, this was a really fun way to celebrate the 1-year anniversary is having you come on, because I wouldn't still be here a year later if it wasn't for you and your team. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, we love working with you, and thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome. All right, friends, we'll catch you on the next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.